Let's talk about this with Peter Bleksley. He's a former Metropolitan Police detective and was a firearms officer himself for 10 years. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to read to you just what Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, had to say on Twitter yesterday over a story about armed officers refusing to carry guns, with a picture of a protest on behalf of the family of Chris Kaba, calling for justice for him. Suella Braverman tweeted yesterday, "We depend on our brave firearms officers to protect us from the most dangerous and violent in society. In the interest of public safety, they have to make split-second decisions under extraordinary pressures." She went on, "They mustn't fear ending up in the dock for carrying out their duties. Officers risking their lives to keep us safe have my full backing, and I will do everything in my power to support them. That's why I've launched a review to ensure they have the confidence to do their jobs while protecting us all." What did you make of that statement, Peter?
I'm very pleased that the Home Secretary announced this review into armed policing yesterday. I think she clearly felt the mood amongst armed police officers, and it was right. It was pretty timely as well. In fact, her announcement of this review preceded the Commissioner's open letter by about some 6 hours. And of course, I've read that thoroughly last night. And again, Sir Mark Rowley has got the mood exactly right. He has tackled in his open letter to the Home Secretary so many of the issues that armed police officers are concerned about. And now, my message to them is, you have had your weekend of discontent. You have been the lead story this morning on just about every major news channel. You took an oath to protect life and property. So please now, your voice has been heard. Go back to work.
That's interesting. You say go back to work. That letter you mentioned from Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, most senior police officer in the land, to the Home Secretary yesterday, saying the system that judges officers' actions should be rooted in integrity and decisions should be reached swiftly, competently, without fear or favour. A review is needed to address accountability mechanisms. He says accountability matters, but we should not have allowed ourselves to develop a system where police officers get investigated for safely pursuing suspects just because the suspect acts recklessly and as a result injures themselves or someone else. This is unfair on our officers and discourages them from chasing down criminals. Now, again, we need to separate this entirely from the specific case that is currently sub judice and is a live court action. There is no doubt that police officers, armed officers, have not en masse walkout like this, but they have increasingly been leaving the job, unwilling to take on these extra responsibilities and duties because of previous cases where officers have been charged, or even if they are found not guilty, having years of it hanging over them, being taken off duties, the stress of it, abuse online and the like. This is a serious issue for a lot of officers.
It very much is, and in his letter, Sir Mark Rowley cites 2 previous cases that are absolutely dreadful examples of what has happened to firearms officers who were both charged, and actually when it came to the court steps on the morning of their trials, the CPS offered no evidence because there was no prospect of securing a conviction in those 2 completely separate, unconnected cases. But it proves the point. And basically, the armed police, their gripe is against the Independent Office of Police Conduct for the amount of time they take about their investigations, the way they release information into the public and more, and also the Crown Prosecution Service. And their bar that they kind of hit appears to be set at a rather different level when it comes to armed police officers than it might be for criminals committing other kinds of crime. And that's what their main gripes are about. If armed police officers have decided that they no longer want to carry a gun, then that's fine. Resign from your department today. You'll be welcome back on response policing with the men and women that are tearing around, going from 999 call to yet another 999 call on the front line. Those who do want to carry on in those armed roles, then once again, I urge you, your voices have been heard, the message has got through, you took an oath.
Yeah.
Stick with that.
I understand what you're saying there. And, people, took an oath and they do their job. But again, this isn't optional. This is voluntary. No one is forced as an officer in any police force in this country to carry a weapon. That is a choice they make. They have to have a lot of training. But do they want to go back to work today and be in that situation and then face a murder charge? Now, the stats on this are extraordinary because so much of people's judgment on this is this idea of trigger-happy policing. We base a lot of that on what we see in America. And we see it on gun show, on cop shows, but we also see it, of course, in real life, where the immediate thing is police officers to get their guns out at all times. Now, we don't have that sort of policing in this country, and thank goodness for that. But we have a completely different rate of firearms being used in this country by criminals and indeed by the police. I think most people would be absolutely astonished to discover how rarely it is that police do open fire. We pretty much hear about every single case. 18,000 incidents in 2022 when police officers were armed police officers were called to the scene of an incident. 18,000 occasions. And of those, 0.05%, so less than 0.1%, less than 1%, a tiny, tiny fraction of those cases was any weapon actually discharged, let alone anyone actually shot dead. There is no suggestion based on those facts that our officers are just walking around if in doubt, I'll just shoot someone on the street.
Absolutely. They are highly trained. They are incredibly physically fit. And I benefited from that training back in the day when I carried a gun. It saved my life on one particular occasion. They are trained. They take their responsibilities very seriously. And consequently, in the Met, for example, last year, weapons were drawn 4,000 times and fired only twice.
Yeah.
That just goes to show what a rare thing it is for an armed police officer in the UK to actually fire their weapon. However, of course, on those occasions, their actions are subjected to the utmost scrutiny.
As they should be.
And that is right. But that scrutiny has got to be fair, proportionate and timely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key point. Can I also ask you about another story? And that is the front page of the Mail today. They claim that Rishi Sunak is going to unveil in the King's speech in November that convicted rapists will be forced to serve their full sentence as part of what we're calling a gear change on crime. I'm very much of the view that everyone should serve their full sentence. I don't know, you can give someone 6 months off for good behaviour. I'd rather add time on for bad behaviour. But why rapists rather than anyone else? As heinous as a crime as rape is, be serving their full sentence, but everyone else not?
Well, that will, of course, be a matter for the Prime Minister to explain his thinking. But, of course, rape and sexual offences, particularly against women, have proved to be particularly difficult to prove, to get people into court, charged and then convicted. So perhaps this is part of a wider kind of plan by saying of those who are convicted of rape, they may serve their entire sentence because he's endeavouring to create some kind of deterrent. I'm not sure that, well, I suspect may be part of his thinking, but in any event, it is such an odious, repugnant and repulsive crime that if anybody convicted serves their full term, they will get no sympathy from me.
I just think it should be really clear that everyone who gets sentenced to 8 years, 10 years, 2 years, whatever it is, that's what you serve. I think the public are being sold a lie on this, but I don't see why rape should be any different to any other crime on that front. Peter Bleksley, always so good to talk to you. Really good to get your perspective as a former